So I wanted to show you just one more way to garden. Now in the ground we prefer our raised beds using the living soil method, where we employ earthworms to do our gardening for us. Well, we really can't do that in a container. These containers have a finite amount of nutrients in them. The plants have whatever available to them, whatever we put into them. And it's really hard to add organic nutrients to a container once the plants get big. And it's the same deal with our herb planters in the house that we talked about earlier. But it's just one more way to grow plants. And what we're going to do is plant some scarlet emperor beans in this earth box, which will be connected with a piece of 1/4-inch vinyl tubing to this earth box with my shadow in it. And then, because they're scarlet emperor beans, they're going to climb this arbor, and it's really quite impressive. The float box connects to the first earth box, and then the stub of tubing is going to have one of our pieces of split tubing connected to it. We just kind of weave that around those supports in this earth box and then connect it to the piece of tubing as it leaves this earth box. And then the second earth box, when the tubing comes in, we're just going to slip a piece of split tubing over it. And since this one doesn't have a second earth box or a third earth box, we'll just leave it lay in there. That's fine. We connect just one of our float boxes with the mini float valve inside, which will, come on, focus, there you go, which will regulate the water level in both of these earth boxes. So rather than connect this to a rain barrel, which we don't have one nearby, or to a domestic water supply directly, which can be done, but it makes me a little nervous. I don't like leaving like that. We're going to use a tote. And not only is it convenient, we're close enough to a water supply, but as the season progresses, we're going to start adding, as the plants require it, a complete hydroponic solution, and start using our hybrid hydroponic method of growing. So I just wanted to show you kind of how we go ahead and set this thing up. I filled the tote with water, and then it filled the float box up to the point where it started flowing then into the first earth box. And then once it started flowing into there, I just went ahead and filled this earth box with the hose up to about where I want the water level to be. And then it started flowing through the tubing into this box. And then this one too, I got impatient. You know, you could just let it fill on its own. It'd probably take a couple hours to stabilize. So I just did it. I filled it up to about where I want it to be. And so then I adjusted the valve down so that it's shut off, so the water won't ever get higher in the boxes than it is right now. In fact, I could probably turn it down a little bit more. You really only need an inch of water in the bottom of these, because it'll always have an inch of water. That's kind of the cool thing about using the float box, is that you have a steady supply of water. And when these scarlet emperor beans mature, there's so much biomass up there that you would have to, if you just used an earth box that was not automated, you would be watering, I imagine, twice a day, filling the earth boxes. So just one more way to garden. Now all we have to do is fill them. Remember, when filling a self-watering, bottom-watering planter, any bottom-watering, self-watering planter, to use a non-mineral based potting mix. You don't use topsoil, you don't use a mineral soil, or they'll become too dense, too waterlogged. You need the capillary action that the cellulose fibers in a this is a peat base, this is ProMix organic that we use in our microgreens planters and our herb planters. But remember too that we need to then make sure that in the corners, is in the case of an earth box, are little cages where the potting mix can get down into the water reservoir, and that's the wick that will wick the water up. And I'm going to use not quite 1 cubic foot of the ProMix. I'll show you. Of the ProMix potting mix, not quite a cubic foot, because then I'm going to also add some of our own compost and some worm castings. The two final things to do before we plant these boxes are, number one, we're going to install our circling stoppers. So I just dig down and set that all the way down onto the screen, that plastic screen that divides the reservoir from the soil. Do that on the other side. Remember, these are just the 1-inch corner bead, what drywall installers use to protect the corners when they're sheetrocking, taping, and they do wonders to reduce the circling of the roots in containers. You know, and I've mentioned this before, but when the roots hit an impervious surface like this, they just keep going around and around thinking they're going in a straight line, and they'll just keep circling. Well, these not only are a physical barrier, but there are also perforations in it, so there's an airspace here, so we actually get some air pruning. Since we started using circling stoppers, we have virtually eliminated the circling of roots, and the roots that develop in our containers are so well branched, they just basically fill the whole container, and they are searching and extracting every speck of nutrients that they can find remaining in the container. So now really the only thing else we have to do, and this is just a one-time shot, I like to say it's priming the pump, is moisten that potting mix from above just this one time, and once it's all hydrated, we're ready to plant. And then once the plants emerge, in this case our beans, then I will mulch, I will cover them with chopped leaves. You know, these came with a cover, they've been gone for years and years, and we never really used them, and we don't fill them completely, but we do fill them up to the top with chopped leaves, and we've never had an issue with flooding. Remember, they have an overflow that's down here, so the water never gets higher in these containers than here. So keep checking back and check on our progress. Oof. Yeah, I was going to start out by griping about the weather, which I tend to do, and how hot it is today. And I went inside and looked at 79 degrees. But it's the humidity. Man, it's humid. Of course, it's hot in the hoop house, but I thought if I start complaining about how hot it is when it's 79, that our families down in South Florida and in Nassau in the Bahamas might get a little upset with us about that. Anyways, long ago I did a video on setting up that earth box, the 2 earth boxes that we were going to plant the Scarlet Emperor beans in. And I haven't done a follow-up since then. So I thought this is a good time to do that because we have some tomatoes in one of our earth boxes that have used up the available nutrients in the earth box, and now they're starting to show the signs of it. So I wanted to do a follow-up video showing how we take them off regular water and then put them on our hybrid hydroponic system. to give them the boost that they need to really flourish. We'll see. I'll do a follow-up on this, and it might take a week or two, but the results are pretty dramatic. So we can take a look at those and then maybe get out of this hoop house and then go over and look at those Scarlet Emperor beans that I planted in those 2 earth boxes that we retrofitted to automate the watering system. So here are those 2 tomato plants. These are 2 that we purchased. They were probably a foot tall when we got them. One is a early girl, I believe, and the other is a cherry, because we wanted some early varieties. And as you can see, we're starting to get some yellowing of the leaves. And as we've talked about container gardening in the past and why we use a hydroponic solution in our containers once plants start telling us that they need nutrition, is because there is only a finite amount of nutrients that are available in these planters. And we don't want to do what like Earthbox tells you to do in the directions. They'll tell you you put a strip of a pound of a 10-10-10, a petroleum-based inorganic fertilizer, and we don't want to do that. So we started out with Pro Mix organic potting mix, the same potting mix that we sell with our microgreens planters, and then we added some of our compost and worm castings. And as you can see from the eggplant, peppers, other peppers, they're doing just fine. Even our habaneras are starting to come on, and some jalapenos we have up there. And I think the peppers would do fine through the whole growing season without supplementing them with any hydroponic solution. But they're in the same lineup with the tomato plants, so they're going to get it, whether they want it or not. So we're going to hook up this tub and add hydroponic solution to that. We'll go over and take a look at that tub. By the way, those tomatoes we planted in that newly placed raised bed that we moved in here, and we just moved soil in and we supplemented it with a soil from our established raised beds that have a really good worm population, and kind of inoculated it, and then added a good 2-3 inch layer of chopped leaves on top. And as you can see, growing in a living soil, even in a hot hoop house, these tomato plants are just flourishing. So I grabbed one of the totes that we have. This is, I don't know, maybe a 15-18 gallon one or something. And then I just filled it with at least 10 gallons of just rainwater from our rain barrel. So the garden hose connects right to our rain barrel. And it also connects to this float box, which feeds our habaneras and our jalapenos up here. But what we're going to do is add hydroponic solution to this tote, and it will go into this float box, which regulates the water level. And these are our old obsolete bottom watering planters that we had inserts for, and then 3 earth boxes. And as you recall, this box has a mini float valve that keeps the water level just where you want it, so it'll always maintain that level in all of the downstream planters. And you can see it's just dripping right now because the plants are taking up water, and at night it'll shut off and just maintain that. So I have some old hydroponic concentrate. This is left over from last year, but it's perfectly fine. So I'm going to add, since that's about 10 gallons in there, I'm going to add about a half cup of part A. It's a little less than full strength, I think, but good enough. I'm sorry, that's part B. That's the calcium nitrate solution, and this is part A, which is the 8-15-36 lettuce fertilizer with the micronutrients and the magnesium sulfate that we add, the Epsom salts that we add to it also. So I'm going to do about a half cup of that, and that almost takes care of that. And just put the lid on and watch the changes in those tomato plants. Now the hydroponic solution concentrate, if you recall from a previous video that I did on using this to supplement your herbs, if you're growing herbs in the microgreen planters, the small planters, it really does wonders. And this is a nutrient kit that we sell that is enough to make 64 gallons. And what it does, you mix part A and part B each into their own separate quart canning jars, which we use, into a quart of water, dissolve that, and then we supply a couple lids that label what each one is, part A and part B, and what's in them. And then you just store those out of the light, store them in the cupboard or whatever, and then just use 1 tablespoon of that concentrate per gallon of water. Let's go take a look at those Scarlet Emperor beans and get out of this hothouse. Before we get out of here, I wanted to point out quickly the adapter that we use. Now you can just take our 1/4-inch tubing, drill a 9/16 hole, put in one of our 3/8-inch silicone grommets, stick the tubing directly in there, and then feed that into your float box and all your downstream planters. But for this, because it's in here and stuff, and you can tend to get some debris in these, I like to put a screen in, so I use this hose adapter. And also generally hose is cheaper than this vinyl tubing, and you can, we've got a lot of hose laying around. You can go long lengths with garden hose. If you want to feed directly from your rain barrels into your planters, you don't want to do the hydroponic business, you can do that. But anyways, this hose adapter, I did a 1/2-inch male barb PEX fitting and male 1/2-inch pipe thread. And then the adapter that screws into is a female 1/2-inch and a male pipe thread, or I'm sorry, hose thread. Now that one, I don't know where I got that, but the one I generally use is this one here, which is a 1/2-inch male pipe thread and a 3/4-inch hose thread adapter. And then the pipe thread then just screws into this 1/2-inch PEX swivel adapter that has that rubber gasket in it. And then if you kind of moisten that barb fitting, it'll slide right into that grommet. So that gives you a nice watertight seal and a way to attach a garden hose to a tote. And we have kits available that I'm going to show you here in a bit that'll help you automate your earth boxes or whatever bottom watering containers you have. But we don't include this because we can't get them that cheap. We can't get them any cheaper than you can buy them locally. In fact, quite a bit more. $1.69 or something like that, our local L&M fleet supply store. So yeah, you can't beat that. All right, now we'll get out of here. So here are the 2 earth boxes that I showed you when we set them up. And this is the tote filled with just our well water from here. There are no nutrients in here yet, and the plants will tell us if and when they need them. But we planted these with Scarlet Emperor beans just a couple weeks ago, I think, and they're already starting to climb here. And then if you recall, the first earth box has a grommet exiting it, and then just some of the 1/4-inch vinyl tubing laying on the ground into the second earth box, in which we have the split tubing laying inside, because if we didn't have the split tubing, by the end of the growing season, these Scarlet Emperor beans, the root systems would completely prevent any water from moving from that box to this box. So the split tubing, it's not perfect, but it does a really good job of allowing water to pass from container to container. By the way, those potatoes we planted, starting to look pretty good. Growing in a living soil is just the slickest way to go as far as I'm concerned. We haven't done a speck of weeding, very little watering. Okay, so I wanted to show you then the kit that we have available that allows you to take your earth box or your whatever bottom watering planter you have and automate it. Because those of you who have grown in earth box type planters in the past know that when the season advances and tomato plants get big and like these scarlet runner beans get big, you have to water them every day, sometimes twice a day. 2 tomatoes will easily use up 4 gallons of water in a day. So that kind of takes the self-watering part out of it. But if you automate them using the float box, then they're truly self-watering. Go away for a weekend, go on vacation. The plants will be just fine. They won't even know you're gone. So to do that, we have a kit. It's available on our website that includes the box that contains the float valve, which is adjustable, and it has the grommet installed already. So you get that. In it, then you get 4 of the circling stoppers. We talked about those in the initial video, or if we didn't, these go in along the edges to reduce or eliminate the circling of roots. And it promotes air pruning of the root systems. They really, for pennies a piece, they really work slick. 4 of those, 6 feet of the 1/4 inch vinyl tubing that can be cut to whatever lengths you want. 5 feet of the corrugated split loom tubing that we use for allowing the water to pass from container to container without the roots plugging up the works. Not that they can't, they still can, especially if you're growing melons. We found they can find their way into that split, but for the most part, they do a wonderful job. We string a dozen planters together. As long as they're all on the same level, that's what's important. They have to be all level, so the water level stays the same. But we've gone the entire growing season, 12 or more, all strung together with the split tubing inside each one that allows that water to pass from planter to planter. So 5 feet of that, you can cut it to fit the inside dimensions of your planter. We give one of the hose adapters, and it includes a screen. If you have debris, especially with rain barrels tend to have debris, that will plug that little orifice in the float valve otherwise, and this just prevents that. And then a couple ratchet clamps that will actually allow you to hook this thing up to domestic water supply. Not that I'm recommending it, because I wouldn't recommend 40 pounds per square inch or more water pressure with 1/4 inch vinyl tubing and these little plastic clamps and go away for the weekend. I've done it, it works, but I'd stick to a rain barrel. Rain barrels are the best. 4 of these silicone grommets for plugging those holes so you can turn them into not self-watering if you prefer. 4 of the silicone grommets and detailed instructions on how to use all this stuff. And then once again, a separate kit is the the hydroponic solution when you get to the point where your plants have used the available nutrients in your containers and it's time to give them a little boost. So, you know, I don't know what else you do. You know, I don't want to use the inorganic fertilizer anymore. We've done it in the past and they grow well, but you know, this stuff contains all the micronutrients, all of the trace elements that the plants need. You know, not as good as growing in a living soil as far as nutrient density and all of that business, but it's sure above buying produce in the store from who knows where that was grown with who knows what. So, until we check back on our tomato plants or check on something else, this is Mark again with Backwood Basics. Let's keep cool and let's grow together.